Well, welcome. Welcome to the Marketing Guides for Small Business podcast. I'm Jen Kelly, and our topic today is the pros and cons of podcasting for small business. We're going to talk about what works, what doesn't, and how to get in on the podcasting opportunity if you don't want to host your own show. So today I'm joined by Ken, Paul, and Ian, and we'll be your marketing guides on this topic. So if you find this show helpful, please share the show. We're going on year 2 of this podcast, and we want to be able to increase our audience and help us find as many small businesses as possible to help. So your share on social media or by word of mouth really helps us. Now, if you're listening to this episode, you probably are already familiar with podcasts, and with so many of them out there now in every niche possible, you may be wondering if it's worth it to start your own podcast. It's really neat because you have full control over your content, your promotion, your scheduling, and what's more freeing than that, right? But is it a good idea? And with all the demands on your time already as a small business owner, is this really worthwhile? Is it really a worthwhile content channel to pursue? So we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
Let's get started. I'm going to start with Ken and Paul. It's a tag team question for you both. So you basically spearheaded this podcast. You've had a series of other marketing guides besides Ian and I on. And I wanted to ask you, why did you decide to start this podcast? How are you sure you could get the technical side going? Can you just walk us through, what happened to get this going and some of what you had to put in place to make episode 1 launch?
Okay. Paul, do you want to start or do you want me?
Go for it.
Okay. All right. Well, partly it was really the thought was triggered because we were all sitting at home with because of the COVID restrictions and shutdowns. And many of the guides that we started this with, Mark Fortune and myself, in particular, we had co-written a book with Ian called Content Marketing Guides for Small Business. And that's not the right title. Content marketing for local search. That's it. And that's it. Yeah. So anyway, I always think about what is the easiest way for me to go about creating content. And we're natural content creators, all of us. And podcasting is really a pretty easy way to do that. The biggest challenge, I think, for most people is one, hearing the sound of their voice and getting comfortable with that. It's always awkward to think, oh my gosh, what am I going to talk about? How can I answer these questions? Or, what can I even ask somebody? Who can I get it to be on as a guest and all that kind of stuff? So our solution to that problem was, let's not worry about having guests. Let's just have a conversation among marketing consultants about topics that we deal with every day or every week or every month of the year, and share our ideas, our thoughts, our concerns. Occasionally we'll pull in a guest. And so doing that really liberated us from one of the big stressors, I think, which is how do you book your guests? From a technical side of things, it really, again, it may seem a little intimidating. Traditionally, if you had a WordPress website, you'd have to sign up for like a Libsyn account or Burberry or something like that to be your podcast distribution network, which means you have to install and configure plugins on your website. And but guess what? You don't have to do that anymore. There are hosted podcast platforms that work really, really well. I actually use 2. We use Bcast for a couple of my other podcasts, and we use podcast.co for this podcast. And they give you guides and help you set up and do the configuration to get your podcast, first of all, built, and then distribute it out to Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, all of the popular, and even several that you may not even know about or have heard of. And so the technical side is much, much easier to set up than I think a lot of people think about. So yeah, and it's just for me, do I want to write a blog post? Do I want to do videos all the time? Podcasting just seemed like a natural fit.
Gotcha. Anything to add, Paul?
Yeah, I just say kind of like what Ken said, that it's a great way to create content, but there's these platforms out there because podcasting has become such a big thing that they have made it really easy. Just the technical issues are pretty much gone
Hmm.
because they have, like I said, these platforms are out there and they have removed those technical barriers and made it really simple.
Yeah. I will say too, when we started this, we came up with, we use our core methodology that all of us were a member of at the time, and all of us now are still too, with the duct tape marketing, framework.
Yeah.
And so we just, but you could do this with frequently asked questions as well. And just that could be your initial set of podcast topics for the first, 10 episodes or so.
Mhm.
One thing too, that's a tip that's out there, if you're trying to grow rapidly, it's good to kind of release that initial batch of 10 podcasts at the same time, and then just ask all your friends to go like and review and comment and share on those podcasts to pick up the natural algorithmic boosts, from the podcast hosting platforms like Apple or Spotify.
Mm-hmm. Good points. Good points. It's interesting how one of the, I guess, one of the negatives about trying to get guests on the podcast, and we know how hard it is to just schedule a meeting normally, right? With all that ping pong back and forth. So to schedule a guest made you guys come up with this kind of panel discussion. And what's really neat, and this will probably lend itself to other industries as well, but what's really neat about that working for the marketing industry is because depending on what kind of, so thinking from the small business point of view, different sizes of business, different focuses, different industries, marketing can work for you, but in very different ways. So we have, 4 different experts sort of weighing in with different experiences, different points of view. So that can really widen the ability to serve more people doing it that way.
Yeah, and I think it's a fairly unique format.
Seems to be. Yeah.
Podcasts are, host and interviewer, and then having a guest, and for us, it's not that. So, I don't want to take up too much time here, but we also have a podcast booking page that we can send people to. They can ask to become a guest on our podcast.
Mm-hmm.
We review those people, and we let them know if they're a good fit or not. We've actually had several guests, and some of the guests we're all really proud of being able to have had on our show. So it's, I think you just got to do it. You got to get over your fear of it. If you have a fear of it, get into the habit of doing something to record yourself. Whether you use it for anything or not, just turn on your webcam, talk into it, get comfortable with it. You know what? It's true. When you talk, and then now I become hyper conscious of my webcam here. Having said that, but when you get into it, you forget you're being recorded. You forget, that there may be a camera or a microphone, and you just kind of go with the flow.
Yeah. This isn't live, is it?
That's so funny because I remember, well, at the beginning of the pandemic, when I heard some people say, "Oh my goodness, being on video," but like you never go into a face-to-face meeting being like, "Okay, don't look at me," right? So it's just a different kind of format. Well, Ian, I want to ask you, what podcasts do you listen to, and what makes you keep returning to your favorites?
Yeah, I'll give you a short history of Ian's podcast world. So it depends when you ask me that question. So I'll answer truthfully about now in a second, but I just also want to share how, depending on your life circumstances, podcasts can become a very large part of your life. So I used to commute to downtown Toronto, large metropolitan area. It was actually an hour and a half there, an hour and a half back. So 3 hours of my life was on a train, a subway. So I listened to a ton of podcasts while I was traveling. And we would actually, in the company I was in, we would actually share podcasts. We'd be like, "Hey, what are you listening to? And what are you listening to?" So during that time, I had a mix of business podcasts and entertainment podcasts. If you look at the stats for what's popular, entertainment's huge, right? But I used to listen to very like all the time, This American Life, which was very fascinating one, different topics each week. And then a spin-off of that was Serial, which was about a serial killer. So very interesting, entertaining type ones. Now, because I run my own business and I'm not commuting, if in the summer I listen to more podcasts because I'm on a tractor mowing my lawn and doing, driving my kids around. Now I listen to, I'm in a BNI group, so I listen to the official BNI podcast with Ivan Meisner. That's super helpful for me to get the most out of that group. People, usually it's around my business influencers that I follow. So John Jantz is one of those. He's got a duct tape marketing podcast. Josh Nelson has a 7-figure agency podcast. Donald Miller has a Business Made Simple podcast. All exceptionally good
and
podcasts.
the Marketing Made Simple podcast.
Yeah, very, very, very good content.
Yeah.
And then from an SEO side, I enjoy listening to Marketing School with Neil Patel and Eric Shu. So those are just a few, but yeah, I mean, I have a very strong focus on business now, whereas before it was a bit of a mix, because when you're, trying to decompress after work on a subway or on the train, you want to listen to something entertaining as well.
Absolutely. Something a little nicer for yourself. Right?
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely.
What about you guys? Like any big, share your best podcast that you listen to, other than this one, of course.
Other than this one, of course. Let me see what's coming in here. So for me, I've got, let me just see here. So I've got Today in Digital Marketing. That's taught a fellow Canadian, right? So his is good. I have Entrepreneurs on Fire. I do the Tim Ferriss Show, The Real AF with Andy Frisella, Human Upgrade. So it used to be the Bulletproof Radio, but so Dave Asprey. I listen to one called Sales Gravy. I listen to Invested with Phil Town. I've got the Cardone Zone. I've got Manager Tools, 6 Pixels of Separation. I've got the Business of Fashion, the Ultimate Entrepreneur, and Russell Peters for some
nice. a comedian, right? Yeah.
Yes. He's our well, I guess he is in America now, but our beloved Canadian dude. So anyways, yeah, mine are more, as you can tell, I'm going through it. I'm like, oh, Jen, do you have any fun? So mine are heavy on the, how do you run the business? How do you run a better, a better engagement with your clients? How, I guess the Tim Ferriss one isn't really life, or isn't really business. It's more, life and, getting your head together. So anyways, it's a little peek into mine.
Yeah. What about Ken and Paul? Do you guys have any favorites?
Go for it, Paul.
Well, I listen to Neil Patel's podcast as well. And Measure School used to have a podcast, but he kind of transitioned that over to YouTube. But that, if you're into analytics and tracking, it's good to listen to. But those are the two biggest ones that I listen to. I tend to seek out information as I need it.
That's what I do. The only two consistently that I ever pay attention to are Marketing Made Simple and Business Made Simple by Donald Miller or Dr. J.J. Peterson. They are both so pragmatic. Every episode you walk away with actionable things that you can implement immediately. So they're fantastic. And then otherwise, I'm a huge music nut. I don't like popular music. I like stuff that nobody hears on regular popular radio stations. And so, I frequently do searches to kind of find out about that music. And so, I listen to some music bloggers, in some cases, just because there's an artist that I was doing a search for, and that's how I found the podcast. But on Sirius XMU, they've got a series of music podcasters that I listen to on a regular basis, like Brooklyn Vegan or my Kentucky blog or something. Gorilla versus Bear is another one. So
And Ken, you've expanded my music world, so maybe you'll have to start your own. Add this to the bottom of the blog about this podcast, or start a new one about the music you listen to.
What's interesting is last night I either had a dream or I had kind of that semi-conscious waking up kind of a thought, where you're not really sure if you're awake or dreaming. And I thought, maybe one of the things we ought to do with this podcast is just kind of have we can't play it on the air, obviously, for copyright reasons, but have kind of a music, a song focus for every episode.
Like a theme.
Popped into my head, but yeah.
It's a neat idea.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
You know what mine would be? You'd like
What's
this.
that?
But this could be constant. So it changes. David Bowie, right?
Yeah.
It
Or
just
Heroes.
applies. Yeah. Yeah.
Heroes
That's
is a
pretty
good one
cool.
too. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, good. Well, Ken, okay, so don't bring up anything technical with this next question, but you've been running this podcast for about 2 years. What has been the most challenging non-technical thing about this project?
Building a following. It's we're all marketers. We all are really good at what we do. I know that for a fact. I've seen it in action several times. I don't think we always treat our own products like this with the same diligence that we do for our clients, and so we suffer a little bit, I think, in terms of helping to get the word out about the great content that we create and share. So I think that's the biggest frustration. It takes time, and we all contribute an hour and a half or more every week to create this podcast, just for our time to show up and answer the questions and have the conversations. But we don't spend as much time as we should marketing it and getting it out there to the rest of the world. And so there's nothing technical. It's just a matter of spending that extra level of time.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And we're not going to be alone. Every business owner knows what this is like. I mean, you run out of enough time and energy to do all of the great things that you want to do.
Yeah, every day. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
And the second hardest thing that you have in this podcast is working with Ian, right?
True.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't understand the words.
Or Jen. Or Paul.
Yeah, your pronunciation throws me sometimes.
Oh,
Sorry.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I don't know how to say my own name. It's like marketing yourself, right?
Oh, I thought he was going to go down the road of like us Canadians saying "a" too much, or what is it about? Or
About.
Project is the one.
project.
Process.
Project. Yeah, process. I can't even say it.
Like our pros.
Oh, that's so funny. Oh, well, we're doing a good job getting along. So, yeah, when I said, okay, no technical problems to you, Ken. So, Paul, I got a technical question for you. So, it makes me laugh every time someone who's highly skilled at technical things says, "Oh, it's not really that technical, right?" Like, maybe not for you, but for us, it's like if it's more than an on-off switch, it's a problem. But so, in all seriousness, if a company really wanted to start podcasting, is it as easy as downloading some software, getting a half decent mic, and away we go? Or are there some other things that they really have to be aware of?
It's almost that easy. It really is not that difficult anymore, like we talked about earlier. But
yeah,
use a platform like, you don't want to just record it on an audio app on your computer. You do want to use a podcasting platform, and a good microphone is important. I wouldn't use a microphone headset combination. I know a lot of people do that, and it does work, but I do think a good microphone is important. But yeah, I mean, it really is not that difficult anymore. Those technical barriers have been removed by these, and that's if you use a podcasting platform. Those technical barriers have been removed. If you wanted, record it on your computer, you're just throwing roadblocks up for yourself. Why would you do that?
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I mean, for example, this podcast started out as a Zoom recording,
Hmm.
and we found that between our webcam microphones, between I know, like, I think Mark actually used his earbuds, the wired ones, not the wireless. Um, and I think Antonio probably had a professional mic. And Paul, I don't know what you use because I've never seen you. But
You see me, just not on the podcast.
true.
Because
I've
Google
never
and
seen you.
Facebook have the largest face recognition software in the world, and I'm sure they sell that to the government.
Yeah.
But seriously, going back to if you're going to use a headset microphone combination, if you spend the money and get a high quality one, then it's fine.
Mm,
If you're going to use that combination, you can't cheap out.
got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
And but by cheaping out, I mean, these things are not thousands of dollars.
Oh, no,
it's
they're
really
not.
about
Not
paying,
anymore.
$40 more for the good version. Is that
Yeah.
what
Yeah,
gotcha.
definitely.
Yeah, I bought a premium webcam from Logitech, and that's what I use. That's what I'm using right now. We do have this podcast professionally edited by an audio video engineer.
Mhm.
So they have the ability to take this quality audio from a live streaming platform. In this case, it's StreamYard, or what we were doing before using just Zoom. And taking the audio file that was recorded from Zoom, and he can clean it up and make it sound professional.
Got it. Absolutely. Ian, I wanted to talk about building an audience, which Ken alluded to, versus focusing on your preparation for every podcast. Just so the listeners know, whoever's hosting has the responsibility to figure out the topic, research it, and then provide the questions and the hosting, I guess the emceeing and the flow for every episode. So I guess the person in the hot seat really has to do their prep, but those questions get sent out days ahead of time, so all of us are able to understand what kind of questions are assigned to us, and then what questions everyone else has, and has the time to prep and be ready for the show. So with the pressure kind of on all of us, right, to promote to our own audience, as well as the pressure to show up and be prepared and know what you're talking about. Can you walk us through like how much time you spend on each, and do you prep more for the show and do a little less on the promotion of it, or how does that work for you?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'll talk generally first, and then I'll talk about myself. So, I think I would, you phrased it as a two-part question. I would actually adjust it slightly if you'll allow me that leeway.
I'll allow you. Of course.
First of all, I think you need and again, this is just generally, I think you need a clear purpose and a strategy of why you're doing this. Why are you investing in it? And this will make sense in a second, why I'm adding this in. But the why, right? This will help guide your efforts. You'll know where to put your priorities. And it'll also help you not get discouraged if your audience size isn't growing as fast as it should be. But the three things I would say that you really need to focus on are delivering great content. That's priority number one, and I'll explain why. Building your audience and leveraging the content for business growth, if it's a business focused podcast. And I would say you always start with building great content first, because no matter how much you advertise or attempt to build an audience, if the content stinks, you won't have any retention. You'll blow your budget on attraction. People will come and they'll be like, this is horrible. So really your first goal is deliver great content. And that doesn't mean, look at the very top podcasts and say, I have to deliver it as good as these guys. It just means, think about who your target audience is, deliver great content that they're hungry for, information, guidance, or entertainment, right? And, and that'll go a long way. it's you use Joe Rogan in the question, I think, and he is the top podcast in the world right now. And a lot of people getting into podcasting are thinking about him, but you have to remember, like, he's been a celebrity, a burgeoning celebrity since 1990, right? Like, he's a celebrity, he has contacts, so he attracts incredible guests. Like, the top podcast he's delivered is Elon Musk and Bernie Sanders and Edward Snowden and Lance Armstrong, right? Like, all of these incredible people. And so remember, that's not your goal. Your goal is to deliver great content that your audience is hungry for.
Mm-hmm.
Building an audience is important, right? You want to make sure that, just as Ken was talking about and you were talking about, Jen, you want to make sure that your efforts are not fruitless, that you're actually creating fruitful results by attracting more people. It's wonderful to create good content. If nobody's listening to that content or reading that content, then it's not actually helping you reach your goals, which leads us back to why you started this in the first place. So live streaming, like, we do live streaming on a few different channels, then it gets delivered to podcast channels. That's certainly like the base of getting out there. The base of getting out there is just deliver it to iTunes, to Spotify, like wherever you can get it on a podcast platform, get it on there. And that can be post-production, right? Like, as Ken was talking about, we get ours cleaned up after the fact, and then it gets posted on those channels. But then the live streaming opportunity, Ken uses a technology called StreamYard, which allows us to stream it out to multiple live stream platforms like Facebook Live and that kind of stuff. So again, that's a way to get greater exposure. It also allows you to share it. It allows you to post in advance to say, hey, our topic coming up this week is this. Here's a link to it, which we do. Other things we can do that we probably don't do well enough, because again, we spend a lot of times running our business. This is kind of a wonderful thing we do on the side, but it's important to us because we invest in it, is get people to review our podcast, get people to share our podcast, especially the content they love. Like, that's how the Elon Musk episode got out to everybody from Joe Rogan, right? Because people are like, whoa, I can't believe Elon Musk was smoking weed on it, stuff like that. So right there, anybody listening is going to go check out that podcast. And I know I've gone on, but the last point I would make is you have to leverage the content. And by that, I mean, you can take your podcast after the fact, you can transcribe it, throw it up on your website as a blog post. You can slice and dice it into shareable content for Facebook, Instagram, you name it, you can use it in multiple ways. So it's really about, leveraging it so that you get more bang for your buck out of it. Things that we do share on social. We do personally share to our circles of influences on our social networks. But there's a lot more we could do. I mean, you can even advertise it on different platforms. There's lots you can do and we can do, and yeah. But those, I would say, the things that I talked about there are probably the lowest hanging fruit, that if anybody's doing a podcast, they should probably do those. Any other additions, Ken, that you can think of, or Jen or Paul?
Yeah, I mean, so one thing is, if some people create a podcast to actually create a business, or to really become a critical part of their business. So, mommy bloggers are now mommy podcasters and or bloggers, and they're doing it as a way to build an audience. They're doing it and intentionally trying to find ways to monetize it so that they get sponsors who pay them, for product placement and things like that. That's not what we've ever tried to do. We're literally here to try to share information. For me, the biggest motivator to podcast is to take it, transcribe it, and turn it into great SEO-able content that I put on my website. That is my objective. It always has been with podcasting. If people hear the podcast or see the podcast, it's gravy, because now they feel like maybe they get to know me and like me and trust me a little bit because they hear my voice or they see me talking on camera. And those are great elements. We take it, we put it, we do a weekly newsletter. It's in our newsletter every week. So people are always reminded that we're doing this. They always have the opportunity. I know people have watched our recordings or listened to our podcast after the fact because they send an email back to me letting me know, that the episode that they just listened to was, 3 or 4 weeks old. It's like, okay, well, that tells me that was because they got the email that reminded them to go check it out. One of the great things about a platform like StreamYard is, and I'm a big fan of content repurposing and reusing content across multiple channels. So StreamYard is great for us because it handles Facebook Live. For us, since I own the account, I can hook up my YouTube channel and I can automatically publish the video onto the YouTube channel. You guys get the video, you can put it on your own YouTube channels. Which I think is great because YouTube is the second most searched site on the web. So having these assets on our YouTube channels is a really good thing to do. Then you can create these things called audiograms where you take a little snippet of a key section, a fairly short section of your episode, and turn that into an Instagram post. So you've got a picture, but then it's a clickable audio file where you can listen to, that little snippet. That's a really popular thing to do with podcasts. There are tools that are actually out there that will slice and dice video and podcast content for you for the specific purposes of repurposing to share on social media. So we do a little bit of that. We don't do as much of it as I would like to for ourselves. And that's a goal for us in 2022.
Good. Great. Ken, if someone wants to get into podcasting but doesn't want the weekly pressure, the prep, and the little bit of tech and the promotional responsibility, you talked briefly about guest podcasting. Can you talk more about what that is and also share what kind of prep someone should be thinking about if they really want to get on the guest podcasting circuit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's the best way to get started in podcasting. It's easy. You have to get booked. So we'll talk about that here in just a second.
Yeah.
But once you are booked, literally all you have to do is show up and be prepared to answer questions or have a conversation. And so it's a great way to create content. It's really easy to be able to do that. It can be challenging to get booked on podcasts. There are services that actually do that. So you can pay, for a service and get booked on 2 podcasts a month, 4 podcasts a month, whatever, rhythm you want to be on. The frustrating thing with being a guest is you're at the mercy of the production schedule of the host. So, I paid for programs where people booked me as a guest. Some of those aligned with book launches. It's always easier to get to be invited to be a guest or accepted to be a guest if you have something new that is newsworthy. A book launch is great. Launching a new online course, or a new training program, or a new marketing service. Any of these things are great for us, are great triggers. So, if you're a roofer, let's say you just signed up a big partnership with, a big shingle manufacturer and you wanted to announce that, maybe that's a good opportunity for you to get on a roofing focused podcast if that's what you want to do. So I would definitely investigate those services. You don't have to use one of those services. There are podcasting aggregators, I guess, if you will, that pull together the most popular podcasts. And then you just click through, go to the websites, and you can submit your own information to try to become a guest. It's probably better if you hire somebody professionally who knows what they're doing and how to do that. But you can do it. You can do it yourself. One thing you have to know is, in order to be a guest, you have to create this thing called a one sheet. And that's what we all refer to it as in podcasting, is a one sheet. And it's basically it's that marketing slick or marketing page that you create that is why should you be a guest, and what can you talk about, and what's your background, and what's your backstory? That's what every podcaster is looking for. Can they bring something new and interesting to my audience? And this one, you're asked to condense this down into a single sheet. It's typically a PDF that you submit, and then you go through the booking process where you pick a date that's available. Most of the time, podcast guesting requires a pre-screening. So you'll either get on the phone with an assistant or the actual podcast host themselves, and they'll ask you a series of questions. Most of the time they're already ready to have you on as a guest when you get to this point. So then they also use it as an opportunity to help prep you. So it's like my experience is, a couple people are like, okay, my final question is always a little bit different, and I want to give you an opportunity to, and don't be surprised when I ask you this question. And they tell me what that question is in advance, and it'd be something like, if you had the opportunity to go to dinner with only one person in the world, who would that be? Okay, so that's their way to kind of close out their podcast, and that's going to vary widely from host to host to host. But yeah, I mean, it's the great thing about guest podcasting is it's a supercharged SEO opportunity for you, because podcasts, if you're a guest, you're already leveraging the hard work that the podcasters the show that you're appearing on, they've already worked hard to get subscribers. You don't have to take care of that problem. They've taken care of it for you. So it's a great way for you to get in front of an audience that's already been built. Most podcasters are perfectly fine with you taking the recording and transcribing it and putting it on your website for SEO purposes, because most podcasters don't do that. They do what's called show notes, and they're short little highlights about what happened in the episode, but it's not the full transcription. Full transcription is 5,000 words, maybe more. Google loves long form content, and so taking that and putting that on your website's an SEO powerhouse. So I think that covers most of what you had in that question.
Yeah, but you brought up something that I want to make sure that people understand. You brought up, a podcast about roofing, and people listening, maybe not familiar, might chuckle about that. Sure can, podcast about roofing, but it's true. Podcasting is so neat in the way that virtually every niche, every subject, every hobby is going to have a selection of podcasts based on that topic. So you really, really can get focused down into your area of expertise.
Absolutely. I mean, in certain respects, podcasts have become a modern expression of like the old forums that we all used to sign up in the early days. When we were using the internet, before there were a lot of these great tools that came along with the advance of Web 2.0, back in 2006 to 8 kind of time frame. You used to log on to a forum and type in your questions and, work within a community there. Now podcasts have kind of become that natural way to solve that problem, but also get it out in front of a whole lot more people than these forums ever thought about doing.
Yeah, it's really amazing. Really amazing. Paul, I'm going to pick on you a little bit. I'm going to say that you like this stat. Let me read the stat out. Despite the many business benefits of launching a video podcast, only 17% of podcasters record on video. So I want you to speak to the value of audio content in a day where video is being pushed as, you got to have it, you got to do it. It's, it's what everybody's doing. Nobody has any, what do you call it? Oh my goodness. Attention span. There we go. Anymore. It's got to be, a 3-second video to catch everybody's attention. Can you play devil's advocate on that and talk about the value of audio content as a reliable means to transfer information?
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that only 17% only record video, given that podcasting started out as an audio format. And so how many videos do you watch without sound? So
Yeah,
we
more than
talk
you
about
think.
video, but sound is a crucial element of that. The Los Angeles Film School actually did a study, and like in film, if the sound doesn't sync with what you're seeing, it's annoying and not believable. And so a lot of times, and this is a fact, just look at your own behavior. You will watch a video that's not perfect if the sound quality is good. But if the sound quality is horrible, even if the video is good, a lot of time we'll just exit out.
Hmm.
And so yeah, sound quality is extremely important. And the other part of it is a lot of people, they'll listen to podcasts while they're in their car, like Ian said, or while they're working out, while they're jogging, while they're, on their rowing machine. And it's rather difficult. Well, you probably shouldn't watch a podcast while you're driving.
Probably not.
And it's rather difficult to watch a video while you're jogging, but it's easy to stick your earbuds in and listen
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
audio quality is extremely important, even more so than the video quality. And like I said, how many videos do you watch without sound?
Yeah. Yeah.
Flying a
enough.
helicopter at the gun range. Like there are a few places we probably shouldn't be watching videos.
Watching videos at the same time.
I have to watch video while I'm shooting target practice.
Paul,
Doesn't work out very good.
you mentioned that study. I read something earlier this week that talked about, we all know this intrinsically, and it's hard for us sometimes to express, but even like a PowerPoint presentation, it is such a bad way to communicate because the words on the slides rarely line up with what people are saying. And this study, I can't remember it off the top of my head where it was, but it was a legitimate source. I think it may have even been like MIT or someplace like that. They talked about the fact that kind of the audio overrides what you're seeing visually when it comes to a PowerPoint presentation. And so now you're forcing the brain to pick and choose. Am I reading? Am I listening? And it compromises the ability for comprehension of both. And that's why great people who talk about the art of presentations, like Guy Kawasaki, and I can't remember the book that he strongly referenced as well. It talks about don't have words on your slides, have images, and let the images tell the story that back up the words that you're saying, kind of a concept. And that's a great way to improve your and I'm taking this down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but it helps to reinforce the power of what you're saying. I say all of that because I still think while video catches our attention, many people, if not most people, probably get a lot more from audio comprehension, as long as you're not competing with that.
Very interesting.
So,
As we wrap up today, I want to go around to each of you and get your last bit of advice. Go for it. Don't go for it for small businesses wanting to start their podcast. Ian, let me start with you.
Sure. First of all, in preparation for this, I think we all know this intrinsically, but I was looking at some stats that you shared, Jen, related to podcasting. And it's important for the listeners to know that like podcasting has been taking off for years and its growth is considerable. Like there's no signs of it stopping in popularity. And when they do it demographically, the younger generation is definitely into podcasts, listening to podcasts. So I think that's important to know. And it's not just, we're based out of North America here, the four of us, but the biggest audiences that listen to podcasts are all over the world. South Korea is the largest audience. So wherever you are, it's important to look at, this is probably the biggest thing I always talk about, whether it's in any kind of marketing, is know why you're doing it and know who your audience is. And if you know those things, I would say jump in, Create 12 topics, like just brainstorm a bunch of topics that you think your audience will find valuable, that you have particular knowledge of, and then just jump in and start recording some podcasts and share them. Tell your mom, tell everyone.
Yeah.
Paul, what do you think? Start the podcast, don't start the podcast?
Well, I think if you're unsure, I think, as Ken talked about earlier, get booked on a few podcasts. That way you're not making any kind of investment in software, hardware, and you can see if you like it or not. Because if you want to start your own podcast, there is some investment in equipment, software platforms, and what's your format? Are you just going to get on there and talk? Are you going to have guests? If you're going to have guests, you have to go find those guests, put the content together. You have to get them to send you questions, however you want to do it. So it is a time investment. So yeah, I would say get yourself booked on some podcasts first and see if you enjoy it. If you get booked on a few podcasts, you're like, this sucks, I hate it, then don't start a podcast.
So practical, Paul. So practical. What do you think, Ken?
That's what I do.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I think certain businesses lend themselves to podcasting much more easily. So I did throw out that roofer example just because not every roofer can or should go out and create their own podcast. I mean, some people are going to be really comfortable and natural at it. There's a guy in the painting community called Nick Slavic, and he does a lot of education and video and podcasting and sharing, and so he's doing that, and he's got a great audience of the right people who are learning from him or experiencing what they need and getting what they need to get out of that. But that doesn't mean that every painter should run out and start their own podcast. But I think every painter or every small business owner probably ought to give some serious consideration to being a guest on the right podcast, so that you can get your message in front of that right ideal target client, that target audience. It could be, we've got a podcast we do called Local St. Charles. Paul and I live in St. Charles County. It's a adjacent county to St. Louis City, and I coordinate this through this Greater St. Charles County Chamber. And we invite businesses on who are chamber members to talk about their business, talk about their challenges. So there are several other podcasts that are just very local. Mm-hmm. And for that, it's not a numbers game. It's just making sure that the right people in St. Charles, in our case, hear the podcast. They find out about it. They know that your business exists. If you do sell something nationally, you want to look at a podcast that maybe is going to get you a more national or even international reach, and that can be very helpful. I've been on podcasts that specifically focus on marketing for contractors, because Paul and I, working at Changescape, we work with a lot of home services and contractor related businesses. Ian, I know, has a focus on the dental industry, so you have your own focuses, Jen. So that you could be on generalized podcasts, but maybe also you want to be on a podcast that has already built the audience of the listeners that make the most sense for you.
Beautiful. That seems like a good place to wrap up today. Thank you for joining us. If you like this podcast, please share it with other businesses, and have a great day, and we'll see you next episode.
See you.